Well, welcome everybody to the Complete Athlete Podcast, where we get you to the next level in your sport and life. Obviously, we're mainly a baseball training facility. We got Zach Dykes here today. Super excited to have him. He's our sports performance trainer on staff, and he's really good at what he does. So, it's going to be a semi-serious podcast. Lots of details Zach might be talking about, but obviously we're going to have fun with it too. So, Zach, thanks for coming on.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah, I know it's a Saturday afternoon. It's probably one of our last nice days, but you're a big part of what we're doing here at Complete Athlete and helping a lot of the kids get to the next level. And we appreciate for having you on. I first want to start it off with just tell us a little bit about yourself, kind of your journey as an athlete, and your background as well.
Okay. Well, I wasn't always a natural athlete. I was more into doing the hunting, outdoorsy type stuff when I was a kid. So I bounced around. I played soccer for a little bit, t-ball, baseball for a while. I think when I was in 5th grade, my baseball team won the championship or something like that.
Sweet, for Plenary Little League probably?
Yep.
Oh, okay.
So there we go. That's like the height of my baseball accomplishments.
Sweet. Do you remember your team?
So Stephen Drost was on my team, Stephen Bailey.
All
those
that
kids.
Drost, yeah. His brother Jake was on my team growing up.
So I was with all of them when I was younger, but I think that was my crowning achievement as far as a little kid. But then middle school, I was just more into the outdoorsy type stuff. And then my 8th grade health teacher was also the high school wrestling coach, and he wanted everybody to come out for wrestling. He's just one of those guys that everybody should come out for the sport. He was gonna ask every single kid, and basically if you told him no, I'm not interested, he'd stop asking you. But I was one of those kids I'll think about it, and ended up coming out for it. And about 2 weeks into high school wrestling, it was just the hardest thing I'd done by far, and I was thinking about quitting. So I wanted to talk to the coach about it. So I went and talked to him, and I was just this is super hard. I'm thinking about quitting. I don't know if it's worth it. And he basically just looked me in the eyes. He's like, it's not for everybody, but if you quit when it's hard, it's never going to get easier. So
see that moment right there.
Yeah.
That doesn't. Do you feel like that happens with a player and a coach nowadays? Because that definitely used to happen more, where the player would actually talk to the coach before they're thinking about quitting. But I feel like these days, a player would probably just quit and not even talk to the coach.
I think I think the problem is that some people think that those relationships can be unhealthy, which they can be. But the problem with that is that because some of them are unhealthy, that they are all scrutinized that way. This is the type of guy that a kid couldn't go to wrestling camp and afford the money. And he's like, well, what are you doing the next week? And he's like, well, it's summer and I'm not doing anything. He's like, you're going to help me reshingle my roof, and you're going to go to wrestling camp, and I'm going to pay for you to go. And
that's awesome.
So that's the type of coach this guy was. Mm-hmm. So anyways, listened to his advice, stuck it out, and it was hard, but I definitely got way better. And then I surrounded myself with people on the team that I didn't even realize how good they were. A lot of people don't realize as an athlete, if you're in a, group or environment, you're going to raise the standard. So when I went in as a freshman, I didn't realize that I had a state entrant, all state.
What,
all
the
state.
Guys that you were training with?
I was just getting my ass handed to me, So I was like, okay, this sucks. But then, it was my sophomore year, I broke into the varsity lineup and I was wrestling up 2 weights. And then my junior and senior year, I was one of the more dominant wrestlers on the team. I think my senior year, I went, 28-4.
Oh,
so,
wow.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
But
and you just started in 8th grade or 9th grade?
9th grade.
Okay.
So still to this day, one of the best achievements I've ever had, or accomplishments, I would say, is the freshman, or a guy that was a coach my freshman year was coaching his son, Ben Chandler, I believe his name was. So Dan Chandler was a 4-time Olympic wrestler, captain of the wrestling team, held the Anoka state, I think he was 4-time state champ.
Oh,
and then Anoka wins record. But he saw me wrestle as a freshman because he was coaching his son on our team. And then he quit coaching, retired. And then he saw me win a tournament my senior year. And then he said, I've never seen anyone improve in 4 years of wrestling as much as I've seen you improve.
That's awesome.
So that was really cool. So that's one of the bigger accomplishments I've had. So
yeah, no, that actually, from that standpoint, you just getting into a sport a little later. When do most kids probably get into wrestling, or is it right around that time?
So the kids that are really dominant, you're talking multiple time all-state, multiple time state champs, they're getting in 3rd, 4th grade, as soon as they can walk.
Yeah.
Some of their parents have the Rogotskis are a wrestling family out of Stillwater. They have a wrestling mat in their house.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
Like a full room. Just
in their whole
for it.
basement.
Yeah.
So their whole basement is a wrestling room and then a sauna. So it's like it's a little bit of a cult. It's different, but
Hey,
it's,
what organization that isn't doing well isn't somewhat of a
yeah, exactly.
That type of feel.
Yeah, but you got to be invested into it. But it's one of those things where the harder it gets, the more you need to push yourself. So I didn't wrestle before, and I wrestled my freshman year, and then sophomore year I did wrestling, track. Senior year I did cross country, wrestling, and track. The reason I did cross country instead of football is because I was training for wrestling in the off season, and the football coach said, "Why don't you come up for football?" Gave him kind of the same runaround that the wrestling coach, I did to the wrestling coach a few years before. And he said, "Well, if you want to sit on your ass all fall, we're working harder than you. That's fine with me." Senior year, captain of the cross country team, had a faster 40 than everyone on the football team. So
there you go. Well, and that, I mean, from our
Yeah.
standpoint as what we do as complete athlete, like you're talking about wrestling, and that we first started out as a baseball training
Yeah.
facility, and we technically are, but all the stuff that you learn through wrestling, and then also just as a runner with track and field and cross country,
Yep.
like kind of go into how you as a performance trainer are kind of integrating a lot of the stuff you've learned as a performance trainer and just all the training that you went through, how you're teaching our athletes as a whole right now.
Well, I think like it all comes down to like, I did all individual sports. And a lot
Yeah.
of people that do team sports don't think of themselves in that individual setting contributing towards the team.
Yeah.
And it's like, nowadays it's very easy to cast blame or, gain praise if you're part of a team, right? It's like you could do nothing or you could do negative things or you could do positive things, right? But if you're part of the team, everyone just lumps the success as part of the team.
Yeah.
When you get very high level athletes as individuals all working towards that same goal, and even they might not like each other, but they're independently working towards that goal and they trust that everyone on the team's working towards that, then you're going to be a lot more successful. So that's what I like to do as far as coaching. I like to acknowledge each individual athlete as like a person, have a
Yeah.
rapport with them, and then make sure everyone's focused in on the same things.
One common goal
Yeah.
as a team.
Yep.
Yeah.
And you can do the Herb Brooks miracle, all this thing, but that's
Yeah.
the thing that I've realized as a coach. It's like, as a coach, you need to be what your players need you to be. It's not what you want them to attain as far as a coach. Like you can want to win a championship, but you might not have the talent to win a championship, right?
Yeah.
So it's like, what are you going to do? You want to make your athletes develop that talent. So, and you need to have a reason to develop it or create that reason, create that drive. And it's little things like, hey, you did that drill better. And it's like, do
Yeah.
you feel the difference with that? And they're like, yeah, okay, well, feel the difference with your swing, right? And then it's like just these little changes. And then
Yeah.
that positive reinforcement just builds and builds and builds.
Yeah, it
So-
builds up that consistency over time after they've done something that probably like, oh yeah, I did feel that difference. Oh, I'm going to build on that in the next session I have with you, whether it's, training stuff with you or, hitting stuff with some of our other hitting coaches and stuff like that.
Well, and coming back to, the relationships with coaching, I just think a lot of parents don't understand because it's, you're not a parent, you're a coach. You're not their friend, you're their coach, and, you're not their teammate, you're their coach. So a coach is going to take athletes to a place that their parent can't take them, their team may not be able to get them, and all these other things. And you have that relationship that's only in that setting.
Yep.
Nothing, you're not going to be like, oh, our coach isn't here, we're going to sub in this person, that sort of thing. It's you're taking them on a journey towards a specific place, and, it might be filled with bumps or whatever, hiccups in the road, but you're going to figure it out. So
I was just reading this the other day, Coach Duke Baxter, where I see a lot of his stuff. He's through that Dominate the Diamond group. I've shared some stuff with
Yeah.
you. He was speaking at the U.S. Baseball conference or whatnot, and he was talking about just how parents, like a parent coach is there. Like this is just something for our viewers if you are a parent, like how you can better serve your athlete. Complementary to what we do as coaches is when you have your hat on, you're the coach and you're talking to the kid, and the kid can actually, if he has his hat on when he gets into the car, like after an event, to better serve them. If the kid takes his hat off, he doesn't want coach dad to talk to him. He just wants dad to talk to him. And then if he keeps his hat on, then you can actually talk as a player coach.
Yep.
So that's a slight thing because I feel like we do see some players who are able to handle the heat from their parent, and that's based off their personality or how they grew up. and others aren't.
Yep.
You know, so it's a time and a place where an athlete will actually listen to their parent as their parent coach.
Yeah.
But then, you know, us in a different light, we're probably only like 10 to 15 years older than some of these kids. And we've kind of done it, so they kind of see it from a different point of view right off the bat.
Yeah, 100%. And I'm not saying, by saying this, I'm not saying coaches know more or they see sides of their athlete that they don't see every day. And that's something that people need to acknowledge. It's the same thing when I'm training a client. It's like, if I see you, you know, if I train you 3 hours a week and then, okay, we train for a month, it's like, I'm probably going to pick up on things as far as how you feel or how you act. And it's just developing those relationships because you care. It might be a kid is, you know, leaning forward more or just kind of head sunken. It's like, you know, might be depressed, whatever, or a kid's really ecstatic, really excited, crushed a test. But you have to be in tune with your athletes. I think a lot of people aren't those player-oriented coaches. So there's only two types of coaching. There's ego-based coaching and there's athlete-based coaching. Ego-based coaching is desire for the goal, and if you fail, then it's a failure of the coach. So people look at the coach and it's like, oh, I failed, I'm terrible, you guys are terrible, I'm going to cuss you out, you guys whatever. Whereas a player-based coach is, hey, everyone's a part of the team, we're focusing on your skill sets. You know, we might not win, but if everybody's performing better, that's a win, right? Because that's, you know, what athletes and athletics is about is, you know, it's life skills. And you might, you know, not play baseball professionally, but if you learn how to work on a team, how to work towards a common goal, that's going to help you in life. The quote, I'm trying to think about this. Uncoachable kids are unemployable adults.
Boom.
And it's just like, yeah, there's been kids that I've tried to coach and they just aren't about like any of it. This is what we're doing now. This is what we're doing now. I can't be on a timetable like this. This is a waste of my time. Like just that structure. Some kids are like, nope.
Oh, like, are you talking about this like in a team setting with the track and field athletes?
Yeah, for whatever reason, where it's just like, you know, for instance, I always say like the warm-up's the most important part of the workout. So if, you know, someone's skipping the warm-up, I'm going to get on them, right? And then it's like kids have been like, well, you're not getting on so-and-so. I'm like, he's next. Yeah.
He's next. He's about to hear. He's about to hear the wrath of Zach Dykes.
I know
you're not like that.
Yeah,
all the
but
time,
it's like I'm gonna call.
If they need it.
Yeah, and that's the thing where it's just like, and you know, we've had this conversation, you know, to the baseball athletes too, is like coaches that don't care just, you know, say nothing. And the problem is that a lot of coaches, if you care about everything, then everything's important. If I tell you everything's important, what does that mean?
Nothing's important.
Yeah. It's like, you know, and like, so for instance, like some things are more important than others where it's like, you know, chit chat at certain points of practice, whatever. I want my kids to be teammates, but it's like you have to make those concessions and double down on things that you need to focus in on. So like athletes having good relationships and good etiquette at practice with each other, really important, you know?
Yep.
And then making sure everyone's focused on the same things.
Yeah.
So.
The same goal in mind with the team. Like, we had to explain a little bit to the national team the other night after you left, after you did your strength and speed stuff, about the live ABs that they were doing in the game. Because I think a lot of kids think, like especially once you get into high school, or maybe even just at the youth level, 8th, 9th grade, they're like, oh, I always get another chance to do something, right? When in reality, we're trying to teach them that, like, there are points where you're not going to get another chance at some point. So some kids the other night were taking more at-bats than they should have been. Yeah. And I was like, no, you only get 3 or 4 because you need to stay focused at that task at hand and actually know that, like, oh, if you strike out, like, you only have, you know, maybe 2 more at-bats in the game because that's more game-like. Yeah. You're not going to do something – you're not going to get 8 at-bats ever in a game. So why would you take 8 at-bats in a night? Because it's not game-like. You're just kind of preparing to, like, strike out. Oh, maybe get a grounder. Oh, I'm going to walk the next at-bat. Like, it's not creating something that's going to actually happen in your life or in a game.
Yeah, 100%. I think you need to simulate things that are practical with training. And I think a lot of people overlook those practical moments where it's just like, what is your athlete going to spend 75% of their time doing? And, you know, okay, we want to train to that. Like talking about reps, like you were talking about earlier, when I do exchanges with my relays, I'm like, the most we should ever do in a day is 3 relay exchanges between each person.
Yep.
If it's 4x1, you're practicing those 3 exchanges at the 100 meter, at the 200 meter, at the 300 meter zones. And we practice, 2 or 3 of them. You go full speed, and you want to simulate those as much as possible. And because of that, it's like they came in too fast, they came in too slow. They make those slight adjustments. We figure it out on the fly. But training for those specific situations, my athletes were dominating this past year in all the relays they were in pretty much. So they didn't have anybody that was close to them. So once they got to state, I had an athlete practice leaving ahead of them and simulating somebody's faster than them. So my team didn't have anybody to compete with. And then all of a sudden they're going to have people breathing down their neck, and they're not used to that. So when we practiced those exchanges at practice, they were terrible.
Yeah.
Because they were just rushed. They're like, I need to catch this guy. I need to catch this guy. I need to catch this guy. And then once they figured it out, be patient with your exchange, At the state track meet this year, that exact same thing happened. There was a team that could have beaten us, and then they rushed out way early because of that same situation.
Yeah,
our guys got the baton. Yeah, our guys got the baton, ran free and clear. Our number one competition blew up the zone, and you heard the guy audibly say some things after he missed his exchange that you can hear on video if you want to look on Twitter.
Bleep, bleep. For sure.
Yeah. So, but that was the situation that we had at practice the day before practicing that. And some of our guys were pretty frustrated about that, but that's what you practice.
Yeah.
So
exactly. And that brings me back to the point. We were asking you about where you came
Yep.
up, and then you obviously were in wrestling, track and field,
Yep.
cross country. Tell us a little bit about your journey after that, and then also tell us about that team that you have been coaching the last few years that you've seen some success with, because obviously we want to talk about the successes you've had as a coach and
Yep.
what you're kind of doing with your athletes.
yeah. So after I was done with high school, I had a pretty good high school career. I was all conference, in a couple of sports, captain a couple of sports my senior year, so cross country, wrestling, track. Then I decided to go off to school. I went up to UMD. I thought it was close enough to home that I could get back on the weekends, that sort of thing.
Amazing spot.
Yep.
Love it up there.
Yep. So it was pretty great. I started off as a biology major, and then my intent with that was to go to medical school or in the medical field. But then it wasn't for me, to be honest. It was, very heavy book learning, chemistry, biology, which, if you need to run through that, but it was just, I'm more of a person.
Kinesthetic
Yeah,
learning.
kinesthetic learner for
yeah.
sure. Yeah, personable, I got diagnosed with ADHD after college.
What?
Believe it or not. Yeah.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So there's that. So I made it through, but then I had a friend who was like, you should do exercise science. You love to work out. You love to train.
How old were you at this point?
I was 18. I was still
18 still?
Yeah, I was just in my first semester was done in college, I think, starting my
Okay.
second semester. He's like, yeah, you should switch to exercise science. So I looked into it, very similar kind of coursework, but then it was more kinesthetic, in person. Went down that route, switched to exercise science. And then I interned for the strength and conditioning department while I was up there. Matt Bauman was the head strength coach. He is a associate strength coach at NDSU now. So he's working over there with the
Matt
football.
Bauman.
Yep.
What's his
So-
background, or how old is he?
So he's probably maybe 10 years older than we are or so, somewhere in
Okay.
there. But yeah, he was
Do you know? Is he from Minnesota area?
he's from Wisconsin, I believe.
okay.
Yeah, so he was in high school, he was a 2-time state champ wrestler, so kind of,
Okay.
identified with him there, and he played football
Yeah.
as well. Then he went to Stevens Point, I think, for his degree, worked with the Bulls, the Chicago Bulls, for his internship. Very smart guy.
Oh wow.
And then ended up at UMD and then being the strength coach. And he was strength coach of the year, I think, in 2010. Learned a lot from him. One of the biggest things that I've learned from Matt Bauman was that, I was trying to train one of our crossover recruits. Like, he was trying to make the team and didn't know the workout. So he's like, I want you to, train these guys on how to do that. And I'm like, okay.
Mm-hmm.
But he never showed me the workout he wanted me to run these athletes through. So I saw the workout, saw the program, and I'm like, oh, I know how to do all this stuff, so I'll run the athlete through. And then he pulls me aside after I'm leading the athlete through, and he has the other intern lead him through, and he's like, have I seen you do any of those movements? I'm like, no. He's like, until I see you do those movements, you know nothing. And it wasn't like an ego thing. It was a checks and balances thing. Because, with the strength conditioning community, regardless of who you are, and I will fight you, literally fight you, I'm serious. The number one rule of any trainer, strength and conditioning coach, is to not hurt your athlete.
100%. Why are they training in the first place?
Yeah, do no harm. So like, and the analogy you can give is if you walk into the room and you're like, hey, I want to train. I train you. You don't get any better, stronger. Okay, you lose money, whatever.
Yeah.
But if I train you and you do get bigger and stronger, but then all of a sudden you blow out a disc, right? Then you can't do any of the thing at all, and you weren't stronger anymore. It's like, well, is that better? And everyone's like, no. So you want to do no harm, and then you want to improve your athletes after that. So just getting them to move well, and then getting them to be strong and move well after that. So I think a lot of trainers focus in on, things they shouldn't. So Matt really emphasized on doing things well with me, learned a ton from him, worked with volleyball, basketball, hockey, football, all the different sports. So got a deep dive in a lot of different things at a high level. After I graduated, I went down back home, found a job managing a gym and training out of there. And then I started coaching track as well. Still, working in the fitness sector for a few years, picked up coaching wrestling, bounced around from a couple of different gyms, ended up at Lifetime. While I was at Lifetime coaching wrestling, I tore my ACL coaching. Athlete moved wrong. I moved wrong. So I had to do the whole had to do the whole rehab thing. That was a really depressing point in my life, to be honest. Just like going through that injury and suffering through that.
Well, you saw your brother. It happened to your brother
in
high school. I guess you were up at Duluth probably while he was rehabbing.
Yep. So I was at Duluth when my little brother was dealing with that. But it was just kind of a, negative thing, because when it happened to me, it was one of those, indestructible kind of 27, 26-year-old kids. It's just like nothing's going to happen. Yeah, nothing's going to happen. Yeah. And then, having to deal with workman's compensation because it happened while I was coaching wrestling. So then that added some gray hairs to my head, this, that, the other thing.
Yeah, that's no fun.
And basically, with everything that's happened the past few years, in and out of the training sector, rehabbing my knee, coaching. So then ended up at Champlain Park, coaching track before the pandemic started. And then after that pandemic year was my first full year actually coaching there. And I transferred from Spring Lake Park. It was just bad blood with the coaching staff there, to be honest. I had my way of doing things and got in arguments with the head coach where it's just like, the kids aren't working hard enough. And I'm like, we're working less hard than last year and their times are dropping.
Yeah, so like what do you you're looking for, and then we're going to actually get into the intricacies of like where, strength training was and has been, and also just where it's going. And I do feel like you are, along with a lot of other trainers these days, are like thinking about like, how do I work with my athlete where he's at and not just over push him and try and get these insane results, which usually ends up getting guys behind the 8 ball because they're overtraining and not getting enough sleep and not doing the correct movement patterns and things like that. But
I definitely think that's the highlight reel type thing, whereas everyone is on social media and everyone sees this person doing this person doing this. The quote I tell everybody is, I've never seen an amazing athlete be anything less than an average weightlifter. Like, there was a guy that went second in the NHL draft, I think in 2014. He couldn't do a single pull-up. So, like, you can't do a single pull-up. Like, there's hundreds of thousands of millions of people that can do a pull-up. Yeah. And you're going to play a professional sport and you can't do a single one.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
Was he from the U.S. or was he from
I'm
country?
not sure where he was from.
Okay.
But that's just, that's something where, and regardless if you're a professional hockey player, whether you're, me or you or a 5-year-old, I think you should be able to do a pull-up. And I think, society has, kind of, steered us away from being active, youthful, healthy individuals like we're supposed to be. We're not supposed to sit at a desk all day. We're not supposed to, eat all this food that's on demand and just sit in front of a TV and watch that and repeat. Yeah. That's not what we're designed to do. I believe, we're designed to move. We're designed to run. We're designed to be active. Like I said, hunting and fishing is something that I like to do. And I was hunting the past 2 days and I walked 40,000 steps both days.
Whoa.
So
the most I've done is like a little over 20,000.
Yeah. So I was definitely sore and I was like, yep, lower body workout, check.
Yeah.
So don't need to do that. But it's like, people are like, well, that's not a workout. I was like, Yeah, it is.
Your body is moving. You're keeping it in motion.
You know, and it's like, was I moving well? Maybe not. I might have stumbled and ate shit on a couple of branches while I was doing it. So that happens. But, you know, it's life.
There you go.
So
my next question, why did you decide to become a professional trainer, and then also specifically with Complete Athlete? Because you've been around with us for probably a year now.
Yep, about a year. As far as like my, you know, training desires, I definitely think about building relationships. That's what it's about. You know, I love people being able to achieve heights and levels that they didn't think they were able to do and be part of that process. My advisor sat me down in college when, you know, I was getting ready to, you know, look in the career field or whatever. And he's like, what do you want to do with the rest of your life? And I was like, I want to make monsters. And like, no hesitation. That was the first thing that I said. And he's like, okay. And he's like, okay. So he's like, you want to, you know, make some athletes? I'm like, yeah. And he's like, okay. And I'm like, well, what if I get an internship with like a local high school? He's like, no, we're going to take a walk. And that's where he walked me down to meet Matt, who's the strength and conditioning coach. And it was like, yeah. So having those relationships and making those connections, like my professor in college, you know, Matt, my strength and conditioning advisor, you know, all those connections, helping people with those processes. You know, a couple of my athletes, one of them just signed with NDSU, track athlete, wasn't expecting to, you know, go for track, but ended up being good enough. And then my fastest athlete this year has, you know, been asking about potentially going to, you know, different schools, that sort of thing. But it's all about relationships and making an impact. And, you know, I wouldn't say, like I said, you're not a parent, but there are certain values and things that you would want to see go off into the world and spread more, you know, integrity, teamwork, things like that. And as a coach, you get to establish those values or encourage those values, hopefully, in your athletes and then spread them out. So that's why I really enjoy doing what I do.
And that's exactly our mission here, which is I'm glad that we have the same mission, kind of forming this partnership together a little bit.
Yeah. So as far as, you know, working with Complete Athlete, you know, I sat down with you, I think a year ago, just talking about working with your athletes. And, you know, I knew some stuff about baseball, not a lot. So like I said, I'm not as well versed. I didn't play it at a collegiate level or high school level, but it was just like, I knew you guys wanted to be explosive and do these exercises and get your own thing going. And it's been with its challenges, but like I've talked to you about before, it's, you know, you want to train the way your athletes move. So explosive movements, I'm like, there's a little bit of job security and me teaching your baseball players how to sprint right. So,
well, yeah, because you're running fast. Actually, let's talk about the one guy that you've been doing training probably the last 6-8 months. Like you've helped him improve dramatically, and we think that's a direct correlation to your training philosophy and what you've put in work for him. Like, you want to talk a little bit about that process?
Yeah, I've just been working with Milo. Milo's a very athletic individual. I think he's going to be a junior now.
He's a junior this year.
Yeah, so junior, I don't know, you know, much about his baseball stats, but I just knew that he was kind of this muscly kid that, you know, wanted to do well in baseball and potentially play at a collegiate level. And then seeing how he moved and his coordination, his flexibility, I was like, yep, there's some stuff to be done here. So worked on his flexibility, movement through stuff. And he's like, well, I want to do this. I want to do this. And then, okay. Yeah. So then I'd give him some stuff and he's like, well, this sucks. And I'm like, well, if you want to do this, then you need to be able to do this because this is directly correlated in your ability to do this. He's like, really? I'm like, then I just do it. And then he's like, oh, okay. And then I'm like, yeah, if I can do it, you should be able to do it.
Yeah.
You know, and that's the thing where I'm not as impressed by the sheer amount of weight people move anymore. I'm impressed about like the athletic positions that they can get in. So like the phrasing with like training is like an implement, right? So pole vault, you use an implement to get over another implement.
Yeah.
Right. So use the pole, get over the standard, and then you land. Right. You could consider the landing a third implement, or you can consider the track like a fourth implement if you want. But then it's baseball. I think the most impressive thing is when a guy's running, does the Ken Griffey Jr., runs off the wall, catches the ball, and comes down.
That's Bo Jackson.
Bo Jackson. Sorry. Okay. Well, I'm sorry.
It's all good. I mean, Ken Griffey might have done it too, but I vividly remember Bo Jackson doing it. Yeah. And then throwing the guy out at first because it's insane.
Yeah, that's even more impressive. Exactly. But with that, it's just like, okay, that is in a very athletic movement, and not at any point in that movement was somebody like, that guy can squat this much.
Yeah.
Just didn't happen. But like, does he probably squat a lot? Probably, you know, or a fair amount. But it's just
the movement quality.
Yeah. It's like, okay, you want to be able to do that. And it's like, how do you train for that? And it's like, well, you need to be flexible, explosive, change direction, all this stuff, where it's just like some baseball coach is like, okay, boys, we're going to run 3 miles today. And it's like
3 mile. Well, that was exactly how, when I first started learning it, run poles, which when I talked to you and we kind of changed this philosophy just probably 8-10 months ago, like I would still have for each inning a pitcher would pitch, I'd still have them run poles. I'd have them do sprint a third of the pole, jog a third, sprint a third, take a break, go back. But now we're just having guys do sprints because it doesn't make sense, like the lactic acid buildup and all that stuff. It's just sprint, get your heart rate up, start the healing process. They'll do maybe 5 to 10 of those, depends on how many innings you pitched. But yeah, I completely went away from the long conditioning. You can still do that, but it's not training the explosive muscles that you are as a pitcher or a hitter or a sprinter.
Like my philosophy, which is really funny in like the training world, is everyone's like, oh, there's anaerobic and aerobic, right? And then my question to those people that are like, you should do this is more aerobic based, this is more anaerobic based, and I go, at what point in your life are you not using oxygen? And then they're all like,
there's lots of trees.
Yeah, that's pretty much what most people, yeah, I'm like, and then it's like, yeah, so at every point in your life you're breathing. You're like, yeah, so at every point in your life you're using that system. And they're like, huh. And I'm like, so you want to not train something you're using every day? And they're like, well, you're confusing me. And it's just like, yeah, it's like, it's basic sense, right? So like, if you look at a high level sprinter, most of their sprint fibers and most of their training is going to be geared towards that anaerobic, without oxygen, right? They're just doing short stuff. But it's like anything you do in a given day, you might walk 40,000 steps hunting. You're going to use that oxygen system, and you want to train, for life. Like a big thing with like the power training, as people get older, their power decreases. So if you establish this power base at a young age as an athlete, you're less likely to lose your strength as you get older. So most people just fall off the wagon as soon as they're done with high school, college, everything, and they don't train that explosive system. And that's why I think people get way unhealthier, way faster.
What about arthritis and stuff like that?
Well, it's like you can develop.
We're not doctors and whatnot.
Yeah, but you can develop and keep that stuff at bay, and your diet is big portion of that.
Weren't you telling me something about like just training as a youth athlete helps with your like bone density as you get older?
So I think the new study that just came out was your muscular strength, and then osteoporosis was directly impacted by weightlifting. So as you get older, it's more important for you to be weightlifting. I believe the study found that people in their 70s that have been weightlifting for 30 years had a skeletal composition similar to that of a 30-year-old that had never lifted in their life.
Wow.
So it's just like, and we haven't seen these progressions over time because we haven't been paying attention to it. Like nobody's been objectively like, hey, this is what's good for you over time as far as like military training, being athletic in the 70s, 80s, Arnold, the bodybuilders, everyone like that. That's when it started to become more of a, fad, if you will. But then that's the whole steroid era, everything like that. Yep. But the knowledge that we know now is just crazy. So the knowledge that we know on the entire history about exercise is literally doubling every 11 months. So everything we've ever known is getting twice as much every 11 months because all this information is getting shared, everything.
I had a question later on, but bring it up now. Where do you think the sports performance world will look like in 10 years?
So there's a great book called The 4-Hour Body by Tim Ferriss.
Oh, Tim Ferriss.
Yep. So there's the 4-Hour Work Week.
Yep. That's what I've read.
Yeah. So his book, I think I've read most of it. I don't know if I've read all of it. But basically he talks the way the progressions is that you try things with the quote unquote racehorses. So you try things experimentally, and then it gets down after the racehorses. You have it at the highest levels. So you can be like, the MMA, the, whatever professional athletes. And then there's the elite level scientists. Then there's the common level scientists. Then there's the common people. And that's typically the way the trends go. And if you look at, for instance, like stem cell therapy, that's the way that was. A couple of people you'd hear about these high-level athletes like, oh, yeah, they flew to, New Zealand or Australia and they got stem cell. But it's just a matter of the market and money with a lot of that stuff. I think the bigger aspects of training are going to be focusing in on things that aren't training. So recovery, sleep, your diet.
I was just having this conversation with a parent yesterday.
I think all these things are going to affect things a lot more. Not to say that things as far as training goes, but I think training is already established enough where so many people are doing so many different things that I think those things that'll work, it's going to be one-offs where somebody will see something that'll work for their type of sport. It might have some correlation to another, training benefit, whatever. But I think systemically as a society, training, whatever, I think the gains that we make nutritionally, the sleep, everything like that, holistic health is going to affect the athletes more. The other thing with that, as far as the training aspect, is there's a book I read, what was it called? The Sports Gene. Sports Gene talks about how we're not getting better athletes, we're getting better at identifying who athletes are going to be. So if you know somebody that's 7 feet tall or taller, there's a 20% chance they're in the NBA right now, or they were in the NBA at some point in their life. So you look at a build like that, and you're like, oh, that person's going to be a basketball player. You look at a build like Michael Phelps, you're like, that person's going to be a swimmer. So you're identifying people early, and then you're like picking them for the select sport they're probably going to have the most success in. And if they establish themselves in it, they'll probably do well. China is doing very well with this as far as like the Olympic team.
Oh, yeah. I'm sure they're just selecting the kids when they're in their first. Like, how can you know at a certain point? Like, what age would you know?
So through the grapevine, what I've heard, this is years ago, but what I was told is that they go to all the villages when the kids are 3 years old, because if you measure a kid's height at 3 and you approximately double it, that's how tall they're going to be. Crude science. But I have
3?
Yes. You double the height at 3, and that's what they're supposed to be.
Man,
so
gotta be some tall 3-year-olds. I wonder how tall Yao
Ming
was.
That
3.
Yeah. So I worked with a guy that was 6'7". He had 2 twin boys, and by the time they were 3 years old, both of his kids were 3'6". So 7'2".
Oh,
That was the projected height for his kids.
So how long ago was this? Do we know what happened to those kids?
So both his kids are in middle school, and they're already 6'2".
Oh my goodness. We'll see what happens. We will let you guys know later what happened.
So they got a foot. But with China, like I said, what I was told is that they went to all the villages and analyzed the testosterone level. So what they did for the boys was it was testy size. So how the greatest ratio, or who had the biggest testicles at that age group, were selected in. And girls, they did arm hair. So the girls that had the hairiest arms had the highest testosterone. So then they select these athletes to go to the Olympic training community. They don't even know what sport you're going to be in yet. They're just like, they send you away from home. Your parents can have another kid, and then you're provided for by the government and state and everything. But it's seen as like the greatest failure if you don't make the cut.
Oh, yeah.
It's
high expectations.
Yeah. So
it's just like, I was actually just watching the tennis documentary on Netflix the other day about Andy Roddick and Marty Fish. Have you seen that? Really good. But those kids were, it's not as intense as what you said, but Marty Fish is actually from Medina.
Yep.
And he became like one of the top players in the world, and went to the top 8 tournament over in London or something with Federer and Nadal and all them. But like Marty Fish and Andy Roddick at a young age were just thrust into this environment, like a training facility type down in tennis, down in Florida for tennis. And like it kind of ate them alive a little bit because these high expectations.
Yep.
Actually, Roddick retired at like 30, 31, and he was just getting into his prime because of the high expectations on him since he was like 5.
Yeah, there's that old quote, adversity breaks some men, others men to break records, as it said. But it's like,
well, both men Marty Fish too. He got broken. He had some mental health stuff after that.
Yeah, and that's the whole thing where you see some of these athletes or people go through these exuberant circumstances, and it just creates this gear, the switch in their head that's completely different. One of the greatest wrestlers of all time is Dan Gable. You've probably heard the name, right?
Yeah.
But nobody knows this about Dan Gable, that his older sister was murdered in his childhood home. Like, this is something that was like, okay, are you going to live in the same house that, if one of your sisters murdered? Probably not. He went up to his parents after this. They were trying to move, and he's like, I'm going to move into her room. We're not leaving this house. She wanted us to live here. And he was a 3-time state champ in Iowa. This kid is a high schooler. So like,
that's crazy.
There's a gear or something happens, these super traumatic things. Similarly, like Daniel Kim, the guy that you see on, I think that's his name, but he's the Navy SEAL Dr. Astronaut.
Who is this guy?
This is a real person. So he's 36. He's a Navy SEAL. He's a Navy doctor, and he's just supposedly made like the astronaut qualification program. He's 36 years old. When he was a kid, he had to call the police on his dad, and there was an altercation because his dad was getting violent with his mom. The police had to kill his dad in front of him.
Yeah.
That, another level traumatic experience, and just created this drive when it's like, okay, there's something there. A lot of people, the most humble people you don't know, and it's like, what situation set up this circumstance for them? And I think as coaches, like, if you don't know your athletes, well, that might be their outlet, right? They're just trying to get away from it. And a lot of people don't think about that, where it's just like, if you have something to double down on or create an environment where it's like you're training to escape, well, then it's like, where do you want to get to? How far do you want to get? And some people are willing to do that.
Because they're willing to go
anywhere.
Go anywhere to get away from whatever it is.
Yep.
Yeah.
It's just
I've seen that slightly through my first few years of coaching here.
Yeah, it can be a distraction. It can be life. It can be whatever, But you just need to establish that relationship with your athlete to know how to coach them. And it's like, some athletes might need you to be there to just watch them throw a ball against the wall or whatever. And then some athletes might need, that father figure, that mother figure, that big brother figure, whatever. But you need to fulfill some sort of need for that athlete to establish a connection with them, and then establish that trust. Once there's trust, you can have a great relationship with those athletes.
Yeah, I think that's one thing that I've noticed. I haven't really thought about it too much, but now thinking about it, I've noticed a lot of our trainers can see just what a kid needs that day. And we were kind of talking about that a little bit before, but what do they need in order to make today a good day and make them want to come back and do more the next day?
Yeah. I had a conversation with a guy that coaches hockey, and he was doing an individual training session, getting paid to coach a couple of goalies at a time. And he was telling me that, the kids were just super stressed out. Like, they had a bunch of tests or whatever. These are high school age kids or middle school age kids. They're super stressed out. And so he just decided with the four of them, they're going to play a game. And they played the game. And then one of the parents saw them and was just, as soon as they were done, he's just like, I'm paying good money for this. You're playing a game with my kids. You're not working on skills, and just came down on him. And he's like, sorry. He's like, I think I might have a little bit more idea of what's going through your kid's head because I'm not at home every day. And what your kid tells me is that they're super stressed, they're super whatever, and, they forgot that they could just be a kid. Sometimes you need to remember that, hey, you play it because it's fun. It's a game. You might get really high anxiety about, bottom of the ninth or whatever. And you need to realize it's a game. And then a lot of people need to think about that and reset. But he's like, yeah, they felt great. They had smiles on their faces. He's like, did they look better when they left than when they came in? And the parent's like, yeah. And he's like, that's what I wanted for today. And he's like, we're going to do a hard thing on Thursday. That's what I was planning to do. But I'm not going to have them ready for that if they just keep dwelling that. And I'm like, grind it out, I need to address my athletes where they're at, not where I want them to be. And they had a great practice on Thursday, and the parent was like, I was wrong about that. It's just like, yep. Sometimes you need...
Do you think a lot of younger coaches would be a little scared to bring that up to a parent?
I think it's a very tough situation to have, just because if you're a coach and you want to talk to a parent, it's like, at the end of the day, and, regardless of what other people feel or, things like that, it's like a parent's choice with their kids is a very powerful thing. So it's a tough conversation to have. Things, like, hey, your kid might have been acting up this situation. They talked to me about this. I'm really concerned. Have those difficult conversations. But then if you care about the kid legitimately and have an honest conversation, I think the parent should always be grateful for that, But the tough part is when, you don't have those as good of relationships with the parents and the kids and that sort of thing. So then that's when things get a little more hostile or whatever you want to say. But it's like, there's things that are seen in a coaching realm. There's things that are seen at home. And it's like, those things shouldn't or should overlap in certain situations, if you get what I mean.
Mm-hmm. So the expectation's got to be there by parent, the coach, the athlete on
Yep.
the front end in order to
Yeah.
get away. Like, I mean, things are going to come up after you've trained somebody for a while that might be different than when they started.
Yeah.
But the expectation on the front end, I feel like, and it's all communication from that standpoint.
I think it's better when you have like family values aligned with high expectations, and you see that a little bit more with some of the wrestling communities where it's just like there's multiple families that have multiple kids that are like state champs, and it's probably because they have high values and all these high standards and everything. But the number of parents that I've seen where it's like their kid is training 20 hours a week, and I'm like, do 20 push-ups, and they're like, oh, I can't. And it's like, your kid's supposed to like do 20 hours of stuff, and I'm like, you might be providing an opportunity that you didn't have, but then if it's important to be physically fit, then why don't you take it upon yourselves? I've seen so many kids that are like, they're going to be above and beyond just because their parents go to the gym a couple of times a week. And it's like, yep, it's important. I'm like, I hate going to the gym, but it's just like, I need to do it. You know, I need to stay healthy, whatever. And they're taking that investment seriously. Whereas, you know, some people are just, you know, it's a paycheck. It's whatever. It's just like, oh, here you go. Like, yeah, just go to the training. It's babysitting. You know, it's one of those things where it's like, well, if you care and you're invested, like there's a couple of camps I had to go to where I had to like work my way to go to camps. And it's like, I worked my way to go to those camps. And then my parents were like, here's the money. Here you go. So it's like they knew I was invested because they were invested, you know?
Yeah,
so.
Absolutely. Everybody's got to be invested in order to get the best results
Yep.
From that standpoint. I kind of asked you most of the stuff that I wanted. Last thing kind of that I wanted was what's kind of your daily routine like? Like what's your ideal day if you could put it together in your head? Sorry, hard one.
Yeah, I guess. I don't know. It depends on, you know, the day and the season. So it's kind of the way I've got my life figured out is it's usually 6 months of super strenuous training cycles. So once November starts here with wrestling, doing the off-season baseball, doing the off-season wrestling, typically. My day for the next 6 months will be wake up around like 5:30, take the dogs to the dog park, make breakfast, then go to the gym, not work out, do all my programming for my first few clients of the day, train my clients in the morning, then go to the gym, eat somewhere in there. Then after I'm done with the gym, go to wrestling practice, roll around with the kids, shower, and then go train some more clients. And that's pretty much my day for about 3 or 4 days a week at least for the next like 6 months. And then if there's a weekend day in there, I usually try to sneak away and go hunting or go to the game farm in January, February. So that's what I like to do.
Gotta have some fun here and there.
Yeah, that's pretty much it. You know, I'm a nerd in a jock's body, so binging the newest Marvel series, whatever else. You know, about the new Modern Warfare, looking to go play that this weekend. So
sweet.
Yep. So yeah, like
we know all the kids we train, they play their video games. I don't know which ones these days, but
yeah, I know, and it's fun to just you know, drop a reference every once in a while and those sort of things. So and keeping the connection with the kids, they're like, oh, you play? I'm like, yep. Like drop your hashtag or name or gamer tag, and I'm like, no. I hear enough screechy voices of yours at practice. I don't need to hear them over the mic. So yeah, that's fine.
And where can listeners find you online, like Instagram, Facebook?
So you can find me. My page is Wagaka Fitness on Facebook.
WGACA Fitness.
Yep. What goes around comes around. So there you go, Wagaka. Feel free to steal that. So
I love it.
Yep. So that's you can find me on there. Or Zach Dykes on Facebook or Instagram, or Dykes Zach on Instagram. So
okay. Dykes _ Zach or just Dykes Zach?
Dykes Zach.
Okay, we'll include it in the show notes. And we'll definitely have you. I literally think we only got to the surface of what we can still talk about. So we'll definitely have you on some other time. But keep doing you. You're doing great with everything you're doing with the track athletes, wrestling, all our athletes here at Complete Athlete. And we are excited to keep having you on board and keep programming all the workouts for all our kids.
Okay. Well, thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Thanks for coming on.